Welcome to Money Matters TV. My name is Paul Mitchell. I'm a commercial banker, and I'm your host for this show. Joining me today is my co-host, Jim DiLorenzo. Lorenzo, Public Relations.
Great to see you again.
Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you.
How are things going out there in the PR world?
Always cooking, always new ideas, always new projects to look at, and opportunities to try to get stories told out there, and especially in the Philadelphia marketplace. But things are going well right now.
Okay. Anything new? Any new angles? Any new ideas from some of your competitors that they're trying things? Or?
A lot of people are asking me about more and more about social media, which we've talked about. But what I'm trying to get more people involved with is working on compelling stories and getting the story straight before we take it to a social media platform, before we get it to a larger audience, so that we work on an authentic story. And my motto lately has been authentic content creates authentic engagement. So if you have a story that is authentic and rings true, it will engage your customers, it'll engage your fans, it'll engage the people you want to be involved with your property. So right now I'm working on some storytelling techniques with my clients to try to get new avenues for them and new ideas, and communicate those new ideas.
Jim, could you give us an example? Could you tell us a little story?
Well, I can. I'm working with a new company that will be coming to market probably in the next month or so, and a tech entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, who has done some wonderful things in the past, and a sports entrepreneur have combined with a medical practice, and they are bringing a revolutionary, and that's a buzzword, but it is a revolutionary technique for opioid addiction treatment. And it involves infusion of certain chemicals and amino acids and neuroscience techniques to overcome not just the withdrawal and the things that happen when you're trying to get off of addictive drugs and alcohol, but also to work on the centers of the brain that make you addicted to certain things. So they've found a treatment that's in heavy use in the West Coast. They're going to be bringing it to the Philadelphia market in the next several weeks. And what I'm working on with them right now is telling the story of some of the recovery and the people who have benefited from this treatment in the past, and how, with Philadelphia being in a crisis with opioid addiction, and I heard something yesterday about Philadelphia having the largest number, is the largest major city to have the highest number of opioid addiction deaths in 2017.
Ouch.
And I mean, that's a horrible statistic, but if you can offer people solid hope, if you can engage their hearts and their minds in the idea that there is a treatment that will work for me. So to tell that story, that there is hope out there, and that there is a way that hasn't been explored before that might change your life for the good. That's the story that I'm working on right now.
What's a great story? As a banker, I also think about, so what's the money model here for these entrepreneurs? I mean, who are they selling the solution to?
Right, and
is the consumer,
it's
the
a
doctor,
it's a
or the
consumer
hospital?
It's a consumer-oriented. It's for the addict, but the sale will be to the family members, or to their employers, or to their friends, or to their therapist.
With insurance companies?
It won't be to the insurance companies at first, because it's not on the formulary for some of these major insurance providers. But if, say, you go to your parish priest or your minister, and you're trying to find a way to solve this problem in your life, we want that minister or the priest or the therapist to say, I've heard about this, I've seen this work, I want to help you. I want to sponsor you with
Yeah,
this.
I think education is such a big important aspect of it. I mean, in my family, we had somebody that, had addiction problems, some years ago and all, and I was amazed how little knowledge was out there. How people would always, if they had a situation, swept under the rug. Nobody
Right.
else never had a problem. One time, a relative, a friend of mine, confided that they heard a story about my relative, and they said, "We also have a relative that's has a problem, and I'm telling you this because heard your story, but don't tell anybody else."
Right. And there's a lot of
Going,
that
why not?
secretiveness, and
Yeah.
almost, well, it is shameful to them,
Yes.
and they want to keep it private. But at the same time, those people who are telling you that story or are concerned about that or heard a story that you relate to, wouldn't it be nice to be able to say, I've heard of something that I think could help you?
Right.
And if you're doing it on the referral basis and you're doing it on, tell a friend, right? You're telling a friend, you're trying to help them overcome this. And it goes beyond what AA and other treatment programs and it goes beyond what rehabilitation centers and things like that do. It's more of a recovery and wellness program than it is pure treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, certainly it's a terrible problem, and it affects most people know somebody. It's somebody's family that has somebody that has had a problem.
And I think
is a
that
problem.
if we can tell good stories, again, this is one of my mantras is to tell good stories that help people.
Yep.
And if I can tell this good story, that's what I want to do.
Right. There are plenty of stories out there that we don't know are true or not.
Yes.
It's on the internet. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. So.
So I try to capture as much authentic content,
Yeah.
True stories, testimony, video, make sure that we have documented, not fake news,
Yeah.
real news.
That's good. That's good. We have a question from one of our viewers. I'd like to see if we can help.
I hope we can.
Okay. The question is from Nancy Wellington of Philadelphia. This sounds right up your alley, Jim. She asks, what are some typical costs of advertisements on radio, TV, and magazines?
That's a good question, Nancy. And it's difficult to give a formula answer to that. But what I can tell you is that the costs for advertising on radio and TV are the factors you'll consider are time of day, repeating of the
Rush
content.
hour, I guess, is a big time.
Morning drive time, afternoon drive time. Are you going to do it overnight on radio, or are you going to do it in the middle of the night on TV, or are you going to do it in prime time?
Okay.
So you want to look at the time period you want to be involved in. So that if you're looking for those peak hours, you're going to pay peak costs on radio and TV.
Can you give us a range? I mean, is it $1,000, 30 seconds at 5 o'clock?
I would say it's more like $5,000 to $10,000 for 30 seconds, depending on which station and which market you're in.
at a prime time.
Right.
How about 1 o'clock in the morning?
Off peak, you would probably pay about $1,000 for a 30-second ad. And the other thing you look at, and this is talking about radio and TV, is what market are you going after? So if you're going into the Philadelphia market, you're going to pay top dollar because you're paying not only for the city of Philadelphia and the suburbs, but you're paying for South Jersey, northern Delaware, parts of beyond the 5-county Philadelphia market that go into Lancaster.
I've heard on the radio commercials by, I'll say, retail entities that are in a certain county, and that's where they are.
Right.
And their advertisement is going to
you're here in Center
another
City,
50
you're hearing
square
something
miles.
that's over in
different county, different state.
Right.
That people aren't going to drive 35 miles to.
And that's something maybe we'll talk about later in the program too. But that happens especially in political campaigns. You'll see ads if you're living in Center City, Philadelphia. You see ads for New Jersey candidates, Delaware candidates,
I'm not gonna vote for
Pennsylvania
them, right?
candidates. So, because Philadelphia has such a large media market, you're going to pay top dollar most of the time for TV and radio. Some of the station groups have package deals where you could buy, say, if you went with CBS Radio Philadelphia, you could get a package deal on all the different stations that they own. CBS TV in Philadelphia, you could get package deal on the digital channels that they have. And 6 ABC is always going to get top dollar because they've been number one in the market for over 30 years. On the print and newspapers and magazines, that market is changing because, especially in newspapers, people aren't buying the physical newspaper as much as they used to. So you want to, if you're going to spend on a newspaper or a magazine, you want to look at not only the print but also the digital side of the advertising. And the same goes for a magazine. If it's a monthly, you're going to pay probably for at least 3 months worth of ads. If it's a weekly, you're going to probably get a month's worth of ads. You're probably not going to get just the one issue.
Could you give us a price range there compared to
Print?
a TV of 1 to 10,000? We're not talking
I would
print.
say 5 to 10 in print. In magazines, in newspapers, I would go anywhere between 500 to 1,500
for how many ads?
for one ad.
One time, one shot,
Yeah.
one weekend. Wow. Okay. And how about these weekly things? These freebies.
The weeklies are different because they have a smaller demographic, smaller reach. So really, you have to negotiate with each one individually. But they're pretty much like a City Avenue News or Chestnut Hill Local. They have an established ad rate that they publish in each issue that you can say, okay, I can afford that.
Yeah. Okay. So, like so many of these things, it sounds a little esoteric to me, but you're in the business, you know how the business works, so somebody that is interested in advertising should try to talk to somebody like Jim Lorenzo or somebody that knows the ropes already.
Yes, you would. I wouldn't necessarily be the one you would want to talk to because I try to stay away from the paid advertising.
Okay.
I'm more of an earned media specialist.
But you know the world, you know how it works, yeah.
But I would recommend someone in the advertising business, or I would put my friends in contact directly with somebody at one of the stations or newspapers.
And if somebody did want to get a hold of you, they could go to
Jim at jhdenterprises.com. My Twitter handle is at jhd16, and my website is jhdenterprises.com.
Very good. Thanks, Jim. Well, if other viewers have questions they would like to have answered on the show, here's how to send in your questions to Money Matters.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Welcome back to our show. We're now going to feature our featured guest, which is Nick Tortorello. He's executive with TMG Partners, LLC. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you.
Well, we heard a little bit about PR. Now I think your field isn't too far afield
It's not.
from that.
In fact, a lot of my clients have been PR firms.
Wow.
And one of my research firms actually did media buying for some of our commercial and political clients. And
so what exactly do you do, Nick?
well, basically, I do surveys about almost anything under the sun, but mostly for major corporations, some for nonprofits like educational institutions or charities. And like I said, we did media buying, and that was a good business because with politicians, they have to pay you the money up front. You pay it out to the stations
Okay,
as you run the
You're not
ads.
too dumb. You learned.
So it's nice to have money sitting in the bank earning
sure.
interest and then pay it to the networks as you need to. So I understand the PR business very well, as well as the polling business.
Yeah. So how long have you been in the polling business?
My whole life. I actually learned about it from pollster Lou Harris at a program I was taking at Yale University when I was still in high school. He talked about his experiences of helping to get John Kennedy elected president.
Wow.
And I was really interested in the story If we got a second, I'll tell you quickly because
Sure,
it's very
absolutely.
interesting.
Great history.
He was in the primaries. Kennedy was running against Hubert Humphrey,
Mm-hmm.
and it looked like Hubert would win it because he had more experience and he was older, knew a lot of the people in the Congress personally. And they ran into a problem in West Virginia, which was Kennedy's religion. As you know, Kennedy was the first Roman Catholic to run for office. And when they went into West Virginia, 80% of the people there said, I'm voting for Humphrey because I don't want a Catholic in the White House. And so Lou went to John Kennedy and said, you've got to deal with this issue.
Mm-hmm.
You have to face it head on. You can't avoid it, can't sweep it under the rug. You got to really face it. So Kennedy started giving speeches about how the Pope would not control the White House, that he was a very inclusive guy. He wasn't going to give a preference to Catholics in jobs or anything like that. And then Lou told the story that 2 weeks before the primary, he went into West Virginia, and people would literally pull their blinds down, lock their doors, and say, don't tell my neighbors, but I'm going to vote for Kennedy.
Oh.
So then he was able to, go to John and say, looks good in West Virginia, we'll win, and they did.
Wow.
So it taught me a couple of lessons. One is that people have their own points of view and their own positions, but sometimes there's not as rock hard solid as you might think. And new information and new education may change the tone of a campaign. So getting people more information and him dealing directly with his Catholicism really turned that race around, which meant you can change people. And I thought that was really fascinating. And from that time on, I started doing polls of people and when I was in high school and college, and never stopped. And I actually got my first job when I got out of college from Lou Harris.
Wow.
And learned the business then at the master's right hand, as they would say.
That's a fascinating story.
How much has the business changed for you over that period of time? Because I can imagine there was a lot of in-person discussion, but there was also, we call it dial-up now, but there was a lot of phone work.
What a great question. When I first started in polling, which would have been the 1960s, the way the data was tabulated was on abacuses. There wasn't even computers then that were being used.
You mean the discs on the strings?
Yes.
Wow.
He had 10 men who actually were from China who worked those abacuses.
Wow.
And the other thing is we used slide rulers to do calculations,
Yeah.
again, for computers. And everything was done in person. We knocked on people's home doors and asked to interview them.
Wow.
Then what came in was telephone polling. And believe it or not, in the late 1960s, only about 40 to 50% of households had telephones where there weren't party lines. And then, of course, over the years, you got more and more people owning telephones, and that got way up into the 98% range of people having phones. And we switched more to polling by telephone. It also helped to create more anonymity. You weren't sitting face to face with somebody. It was less dangerous for the interviewers, because when they went into a house, there might be a huge dog or somebody who really wasn't very friendly to the questions you were asking. So it was safer also to do it by phone. And now, of course, today we do it on cell phone. We do it online on computers. The whole business has changed enormously. To some degree, it's created a little chaos because when we were doing things door to door, and even when we were doing them by phone, it was easy to control for demographics, making sure you were getting the right balance of men and women, different age groups, different education levels. With cell phones, it's not as apparent, who you're getting on the other side of the cell phone and how old they might be. So one of the problems with the newer technologies is you never know who's really answering the questionnaire online on a computer and who may be answering on cell phones.
I can't help but interrupt. So, I mean, my cell phone is not public information. How do you guys get my cell phone number?
Just like we used to do with telephones, we randomized the digits.
Wow,
We get all the working area codes in the country and then randomize the last 4 digits. And we may pick you up.
Okay.
A lot of people will say, gee, all these polls, I've never been polled.
Yeah, right.
Well, part of the reason is because the way they used to do sampling in those days with blocks and different area maps. Today, a lot of phones aren't listed, which forced us to go to randomization of digits, and it works on cell phones as well. Now, the problem, not so much because people buy packages now, but when we first started doing cell phones, people didn't want us calling them because it cost them money if they picked up the phone and answered it.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Now with package deals that you can get from Verizon and others,
Right.
that's not such an issue anymore because you have unlimited numbers of calls you can receive or send out. So the technology is always changing, and that changes us in terms of how we do the interviewing and the surveys.
Could you give us a couple of case studies?
Oh, I'd love to. Well, let me start, since you're an investment banker, with a banking study experience. In early 1980s, Chemical Bank, they now are part of J.P. Morgan.
Huge bank, right?
Right, huge money center bank, came to me and said, we have a problem. We do really well with wealthy people. We do very well with the middle market. We do terrible with small businesses. And Citibank is eating us for lunch. Can you think of a way or a technique that we could build our small business market? Now, in those days, the way they used to market was they would take a business they targeted that they'd like to become a client of the bank and take them out to a nice lunch for a few $100s or whatever, and then say at the end of the lunch, how about joining and being
Now,
part of the bank?
Both Chemical Bank and Citibank, based in Manhattan.
Correct.
Now, they were pretty much just for that type of business in that region. They weren't doing stuff in Utah or New Mexico.
Well, as you
New
know,
Orleans,
after like the 1980s, they started spreading out, so that Chemical became very interested in what was going on in Connecticut, what was going on in New Jersey. They started opening branches.
Okay.
So they started to spread out before they became a national bank. So they were very interested, of course, again, in building the small business clients in those different states. So we came up with a technique where we would go to a business guy. Now, in a small business, it would be the guy who owned the company. In middle market companies, it might be the treasurer. It might be some kind of CFO. And certainly if you got to large companies, it would be a CFO, Chief Financial Officer. But with a small business component and doing the owners, we would ask them, like, who you're doing your banking with. What do you like about them? What's their strengths and weaknesses? If there was something else you could get from the bank, who would it be? And so we'd ask them all the questions about their banking relationships, get a pretty good handle on what they liked, what they didn't like, what they'd like to get, like loans without collateral when you're a small
Sure, why not? No interest, right?
Things like that. And so we would report this stuff back, and the last third of the questionnaire was really important. We'd say to them, well, have you ever heard of Chemical? What do you think of Chemical? What's their image? Do you ever see yourself doing business with it? Why or why not? So we'd gather all this information about a business, then go to Chemical Bank and say, here's what this company says about you, how they think about you, how they look at their competition, and here are things that you could approach them with that might get your foot in the door. And it became a phenomenon in terms of how much business they picked up. Because everybody had to complain about their current bank.
Sure.
Like I said, you usually had to put up collateral.
Pay it back.
Right, all these sorts of things. And all of a sudden,
Personal
Chemical
guarantees,
was ordering, saying, well, you may not have to give us personal guarantees. We'd like to get some of your business. Just try us. We're not asking to become your primary bank. We'll be happy being your tertiary bank. But let us just start serving you and you see how we do. Well, they kept getting more and more businesses becoming. And we did that study for 10 years. We ended up doing it 3 times a year. We're talking about like 3,000 interviews each time. And in all these different states as they were adding states.
Now, I'm a skeptic.
Of course.
Why would, and it's tough to get a hold of a business owner.
Right.
Why would a business owner talk to you? What's in it for them?
There are a couple of things. We did offer them things like baseball tickets.
Okay.
As they got restaurant guide,
All right.
hotel guide. So there was a little incentive.
Okay.
But the biggest thing was they learned by doing the survey. They learned by the questions we asked about all these different banks they could choose from. What the images were to some degree of each of these banks.
Would you share? I mean, you would share some of the survey with them?
Well, the way we asked the questions, we
Okay.
would say, Citibank is known for this.
Yeah.
Chemical is known for
Okay.
that. Do you think Chemical could do what Citi's doing?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
Okay.
And it became an eye-opener for the people trying to sell for Chemical.
Yeah.
And what was really good about it is they knew going into that meeting with that person a lot of information about
Mhm.
them, but also had an idea of how hard a sell it was going to have to be,
Yeah.
and what approach to take with them, or where they weren't getting served.
Mhm.
Maybe they were just starting to go into international banking,
Sure.
and Citi wasn't doing such a great job at that, so that they could see Chemical doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would say, well, if I'm going to do more international banking, maybe I ought to think of using Chemical.
Now, that particular example that you gave with Chemical Bank, the respondents, did Chemical go back to the individual respondents and have
Yes.
their information?
And we had to be really careful because we would tell them at the front, depending on how you answer this questionnaire, it's a possibility our client would like to talk to you. Then, of course, when we got to the end of the questionnaire, we were asking about Chemical. They knew who obviously the client was.
Right.
And we'd ask them again, we know you have a different bank. Do you mind answering these questions about Chemical? And then at the end, we'd say, it's possible a Chemical calling officer would like to come see you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to meet with them? So we got 3 different permissions from them.
Yeah.
And if they gave us those 3 permissions, particularly the one at the end which said, yes, they can come visit me or contact me.
Mhm.
And we'd ask them, do you want to get a phone call? Do you
Yeah.
want to be visited in person?
Okay.
How do you want to handle that meeting? We could feed that information to Chemical. But we always made sure they understood they didn't have total anonymity if they agreed to do this stuff.
Mhm.
And so they chose to do it. And
Yeah.
they weren't surprised when they got a call from a bank officer, why don't we go to lunch on Friday and
Yeah.
talk about your banking relationships?
Very good.
Nick, it's a big, complex subject, and we don't have all the time in the world.
No.
Unfortunately, we'll have you back again, I hope. But what are some of the major concerns with political polls today in terms of accuracy and truth? I think our viewers would be very interested in hearing your
Yeah.
perspectives.
You always have to be careful about political polls because they're not necessarily trying to be objective or find truth. And what I mean by that is a lot of polls are done for fundraising. The way they'll ask the questions will be designed to show that that particular candidate could win. And the reason is they want to produce data that says so-and-so, although he's not the incumbent, could win, and then would you give $10 or $25 to the campaign? And we call it frugging, fundraising under the guise of being research, which is,
Okay.
in our business, a total no-no.
Okay.
So that's why political pollsters don't belong to things like the American Association of Public Opinion Research or an organization we had called the Council of American Survey Research Organization.
More scientific oriented.
Yeah, and not only that, but our promise was objectivity. Our promise is not to be trying to sell you something, not trying to gain donations from you. And so we have a code of conduct and ethics that both those trade associations follow. And if you're a member, you don't do political polling. I'll give you my direct email, and I say that to anybody who's
Sure.
listening who's interested. You can reach me. It's very easy. Tortorello, Tortorello, @hotmail.com.
Okay.
And you can get me directly that way. I'll answer the phone, and we can talk about anything
Terrific.
you're interested
Nick,
in.
thank you very much. Really
Thank
fascinating
you.
subject. You
Thank
told
you.
it very, very well.
Thank you.
So that brings our show to a close for this show. And our next guest for the next show will be James R. Hanna, CPA with Markham Partners, an accounting and business consultancy. So in the meantime, please remember that on this show, your money matters.